How's it going, my G's? Hope you're all doing good. And today I've got just a really quick little video on a nice late night jungle kind of bassy pad arrangement. Okay, I'll play it in 1 second. And yeah, it's a little bit different to the videos I normally do, but I don't want you to think just because I'm a young up and comer that I'm not a massive fan of that old school jungle sound. That's how I got into drum and bass as a whole. I might not have been there with some of you guys back in the day, raving out at these not like late 90s D&B raves, but I wasn't old enough. But you can bet that I was listening to the tape packs in the back of my mum's car on my MP3 player. I listened to all old Nicky Blackmarket, LTJ Bookham. Like, this is kind of a bit more, I would say, LTJ Bookham kind of sounding, I suppose. And all I want to talk about today is how I made this sound in Phase Plant, and then I'll share it with you guys. If you're on Discord and Patreon as well, I'll drop the preset in there, but I'm going to run you through it here so you can also recreate it. But this is the sound then that we're going to deal with. I love this sound. It sounds proper classic, and I kind of stumbled across making it by accident, and then I just went down that direction. You know how you just kind of go with the flow with sound design. I'm building some presets for Phase Plant pack, and then I just thought I'd do something a bit different to just the neuro stuff. But yeah, I've laid it up in this arrangement with a cheeky Amen break, and we're a bit slower here. We're at 137 BPM, just because that's what the break was, and it just sounded cool, and I wanted to groove along slowly for this one. And then I've got this lo-fi sub, which is one of my vital presets. Shout out to all of you guys who've bought those. It really has helped me a lot as well. Able to keep making videos and do what I do when you guys cop the presets. So really appreciate that. So this is from one of the packs. I can't remember which one. I could probably have a look for you, but it's the lo-fi sub. It's on one of the last 3 recent vital packs, I think. Anyway, it's a sub with like some extra harmonics. So it's got a bit of extra kind of noise and a bit more, tiny bit more mid-range, and it sits underneath the pad basically, and it's not doing the same pattern because the pad is kind of going all over the place melodically. There's a lovely bit of glide on there as well, but it's really moving up and down and all around. But the root note is E, and then for the sub pattern, all I've done is I've just played just E, so they sort of, at times they'll be together, like the start, but then the pad will break away and the sub will just keep holding down the fort at E, So I especially like that when it harmonizes, because when it breaks away from the root note, but the sub stays the same. So yeah, I like that arrangement a lot. I'd probably go, if I was really serious about this, I'd modernize the drums by layering up the break with a bit of a newer or just a fatter kick and snare underneath, just kind of with sine waves and white noise, just to get the low end a bit fatter. I would keep the exact tonality of the break. If those of you guys want to do like mentorship as well, if you ever want to have just a session on like fattening up an amen break, like I can arrange that as well. It's not too difficult once you know the fundamentals and you're just kind of using sine waves and white noise and things like that to beef it up. But yeah, let's jump into the phase plant of this this patch then. And there's one like kind of modulation that I've done, which is in the automation, which is this which is the speed. So it just goes sort of up and down, and then when it gets to these higher notes, it starts to go a bit faster. And that's just tracking to my main LFO. So there's like an LFO, which is basically only really on 2 things. So on a low pass filter, so it's kind of giving it a little bit of a filter wobble. Then it's also on the first wavetable position as well. Alright, so breaking down the patch then. It's not super complicated, but it's basically the sound comes from the wavetables that I chose, and then the global unison mode, which is doing a minor chord on everything. So it's really easy to, get that nice, minor sound just by switching that on. And then obviously you're limited to what notes will work. Some of them, I know with that kind of jungle like vibe like that, you can I've heard jungle tracks where the like chord progression just doesn't make sense. It doesn't sound good, but they do it anyway because they just don't care. It's like you could kind of just play any note. It's kind of like a hand drum at this point. Just everything sounds good because it's just a nice tone. Shout out to Tony. Anyway, the brass is the first one. So it's acoustic. So all the sounds are coming in phase plant anyway. I don't work for phase plant. They gave me phase plant for free though because I've made loads of videos for them. So shout outs to Stu from Killer Hearts, absolute G. But basically, I'm not actually advocating phase plant for any reason other than I find it has the most limitless options for experimenting with sound design at the moment. Who knows what will come next? Vital is fantastic for me because I can really quickly make wicked sounds. But if I want to do some, if I want to explore deeper into sound design, I'd use this, right? But yeah, it can be complex to look at, when you first get into it. But when you understand basic synthesis, then it's not super, you can keep it simple. You don't have to use like a million things. You can just use a couple of sine waves detuned with a bit of white noise, a bit of distortion, and there you go. So I've got this brass one here, and that's just, everything's kind of normal. Nothing really going on, except for the frame. So this is where you change the wavetable position. So yeah, it's just kind of at 83, and that's modulating up and down. So it's kind of giving a bit of phase like modulation in the wavetable on this LFO. And what I've done here is I've created an LFO sandwich, basically, which is my coined term, where it's simply just modifying the phase position of one LFO with another LFO. So you can see it kind of like, you can see the speed of it. It doesn't go up and down at a consistent speed. It kind of just like skips around a bit because this one is I've set the output here to modulate the phase and turned that all the way up. So basically it's going to keep changing the start position. So essentially it becomes a bit more random with the movement. It's not just up and down, it's pretty random. But the overall speed, I changed that here on the macro. So how fast and random it's going to be, basically. But yeah, that's already being automated. So yeah, the other thing that kind of goes up and down is the, like I said, the wavetable position. That's it, really. And then I could actually soften the attack time a little bit. It would probably sound a bit nicer. Yeah. So I double click the attack and release usually on phase plant because it's normally like too short and too short here on the release as well. So you just double click it and it goes to 100. So you get a little bit more of a tail. There is reverb on here already, by the way. So then the other sound then. So that's at 0 in terms of the pitch. And then there's another one here, which is a sample. So yeah, phase plant sample section, but it's a sample that comes loaded with phase plant, and it's the analog string match one. And these are kind of just like old school analog synths. And I was just browsing through them, and then when I put this one on, it just perfectly complemented this one. It's like it's basically like how Russia and China complement each other geopolitically, because one has like everything and the other has nothing but has all the manpower. So that has nothing to do with music, sorry. Basically, they just complement each other in such a way that was just random. I was just cycling through and it suddenly came to that, and I thought I'd share it basically because it sounds wicked. So I'm not magician. I just cycled through the presets here. What I beefed it up with was just another sine wave, and I tried it lower, but the problem is I've got this minor chord mode on the global unison, so like a low sine wave. If I turn that up, it becomes horrible because basically it's trying to make a chord out of the sub bass. Yeah, so I just kind of left it up at 0, so sort of a higher up sine wave, kind of padding the sound a little bit more. But you do really feel it in there because it kind of was lacking a sine wave, because the sine wave gives it a bit more power. So really important to have that in as well. But I've just turned it down a little bit, so it's at 29% volume here. But yeah, so they're all just at 0 in terms of pitch, nothing crazy. But obviously that makes it a bit easier for the global unison algorithm to do its job, because nothing's too complicated before you turn it into a chord. So that's the idea, really. And then, this blend mode will make it a chord, and I've put it on a macro, so if it was off, you can sort of slowly introduce the chord like into the sound if you want. But I just kind of liked it at full 100%. I love when it goes up like an octave here. It sounds so juicy. So then that's basically that part done. The glide is set quite nice and high, 120, legato, polyphony, one voice only, simple stuff here. And then all of these 3 sounds together, they all get sent to lane 1, and I've done some distortion here, but I haven't used so much like I normally do on my neuro basses, because it's a soft sound, so you quickly destroy it. You'll get that distortion rumble if it's up too high. But about 2 dB, it essentially just gives me that little bit of saturation that glues them all together a little bit more. Without it, it's kind of the same, but it's just quieter. So basically, it's just kind of turning them all up together a little bit. It's not really changing the tone at all, really. It's just kind of volume boosting. But with saturation, it's better to do it, because you can sort of get a sense for, how much louder you can sort of push it. I prefer to do it that way. Then we've got a non-linear filter on the clean mode, so pretty nice and simple. I tried some of the other ones, but the clean ones was just the best. And here's just the little movement on the LFO on the cutoff. So we're kind of just taking out a little bit of high end every now and again. And again, it's quite a subtle one, to be fair. I just wanted to get a little bit of movement into the sound somewhere, So that was a way I could introduce just a tiny bit of movement in the high end that wasn't too extreme. Then we've got a bit of reverb. Convolution, the Falkland Palace, which is always a good choice for me, and then boosting the high end a little bit, so it doesn't have too much up there. I could fill it in with a bit more white noise if I really wanted to as well. We can do that quickly now, because I often do this. I kind of just forgot. So I'll put on the noise, and then I'll put on a filter here. I'll put the high pass on, turn that right up, and then bring the Q down a little bit. It's going to be really loud still, so we'll turn it down here. Okay, but I want it really subtle, so I'm going to go up a bit higher, give it a bit of stereo, and now we'll bring it down to 1 or 2%. Let's do 2%. It'll just give it a tiny bit of extra push in the mix down when you play it along with all the other sounds. So that's basically it done then with that bit of noise. I haven't done too many effects again, because the pad was already kind of completed once it had the chord mode enabled, and it had the marriage of these two geopolitical layers here, the brass and the string Mach 1. So yeah, feel free to go and copy that, but it sounds wicked. I love that as a jungly kind of pad sound. And it's just perfectly complementing a basic sub bass and an almond break, in my opinion. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video. No editing today, nice and short, keep it simple. Peace out, much love.